Welcome, Pewter Report readers and listeners, to another edition of the Pewter Report podcast, energized by Celsius. It's Throwback Thursday on the Pewter Report podcast, the first ever Throwback Thursday episode, Mark Cook. And isn't it amazing that on this first ever Throwback Thursday episode, just hours before, not even an hour before, we got the announcement that the creamsicle jerseys are coming back, baby. How do you feel about it, Mark?
It can't come soon enough, man. I mean, just wear them all year this year. That's how much I love the creamsicle uniforms. But I'm an old guy, so I was around back in the old days. That's what I grew up with. I mean, I had the pajamas and the robe and the pennants and the hats and all this stuff for the creamsicle. And so whenever they changed uniforms in '97, I had to buy an entire new wardrobe. So I would love to be able to break out some of the old creamsicle stuff. I would love it.
Well, it would be great. It won't be until 2022, though, that's going to be able to happen, at least, and make sense, because that's when the Bucs can bring those jerseys back. The NFL had originally made that rule for player safety purposes, trying to get that one helmet and it fits the player or whatever. I don't understand. It never made sense to me. Just get a second helmet. That's what you do before. I don't get it. But yeah, right. So they're now going to have to fit it and make sure it's the same make, model, and all that kind of stuff. But I think that's something the league can easily do, and they've committed to it. So we're going to see throwback jerseys everywhere. We're obviously excited about the creamsicles and excited to hear from Bucs fans. Sound off in the chat if you're happy about the creamsicles, if you're excited about that uniform jersey color coming back for the Bucs, or if you're on the side of things. I know it can be a bit polarizing. I think most fans like them, but I know it can be a bit polarizing, and some people are out on those jerseys. So sound off in the chat and let us know what you think. I love it as a change of pace. I don't know if I'd want it as a regular jersey, but as a change of pace, I'm definitely a fan of it. I'm excited to see it come back in 2022. Wish it was this season, but I wrote in the article up on Pewter Report, if the Bucs can find a way to make magic happen this year, I think the creamsicles could help them in 2022. We're looking at a three-peat all of a sudden, Mark. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, a long way to go there. Some thoughts. Mike Reynolds, God no, please not creamsicles. So much suffering. Oh, he hates it.
Oh,
wow.
Mike, just stop it. Go,
Mike.
You got to stop watching the podcast. Leave.
Razor Squid says, I am glad to see my boy Mike Evans in creamsicle. Let's go. He's
never worn the creamsicles. Yep.
That's right. Is Lavonte David the only Buck who's worn?
The only active one. I mean, before that, you had DeMar Dotson and Gerald McCoy, but that's really it of anybody in a long time. In fact, you and I wrote two stories about the creamsicles. I had Brian Ford in an interview today and asked him about it specifically, and then the news came out, so he knew what was coming out. He just couldn't say anything, Right. And
it was 2 hours too early for Brian.
Yeah.
He hinted it's coming, and then right away it was an immediate announcement. So we ended up with an overload of creamsicle news today at Pewter Report. We've got Rondé Barber all over the front page of Pewter Report in the year 2021.
We've got a couple photos. There's a couple of Vincent Jackson ones in the admin, but I didn't see your note till later on that you needed a creamsicle photo, or I would have told you to use Vincent. But although rest in peace, Vincent, I'm not sure that would have been the most appropriate one. Yeah, there are some Lavonte ones floating around out there in our archive, but anyway, we just didn't have one in the right size.
Lance wants the throwback all white with the orange numbers. How do you feel about this? I don't like it as much as the creamsicles.
No, I don't think they'll ever do that. They may sell the white jersey with the orange numbers, but as far as wearing those, I don't know that they'll do that. In fact, that one to me is more associated with losing than the orange one. The orange one was your home uniform, and the white one was the road uniform. And during that stretch where the Buccaneers were awful, if they did happen to win a couple games, normally those were home games. So, of course, we didn't get to see them unless you were at the stadium, John, because none of the games were on television. You're too young to remember the blackout rule. Plus, you're from Pittsburgh, where every game was always sold out forever. But Buccaneer fans that have been around a long time remember, before the Super Bowl year, it was tough to see a home Bucs game unless you went to the stadium. There were a couple teams, the Chicago Bears, that they sold out every year within. And not only did they have to sell out, John, they had to sell out 72 hours. Thursday at 1 or Thursday at 4, they had to have sold out the 74,562 seats in the old Tampa Stadium. And that didn't happen very often.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I'm wondering if that you mentioned the white and the orange numbers. I'm wondering if that one even comes back at any point. But I think you're right. It's probably one that they don't go back to or whatever. But I think the creamsicles being back as a change of pace would be great. I think that would be something the fan base would get behind, and we know the players would. Tom Brady's kind of clamored for this for a while. He's posted a couple times on Instagram and social media over the last year and a half or whatever it's been that he hopes that those jerseys come back and he wants to wear them. And so.
How many years before the alarm clock number uniforms are considered throwback uniforms? I mean, 10 years from now, do we get a throwback with the alarm?
No, don't ever.
Just
if those ever come back, I'm not covering the team.
No, I will not go to that game. Nope, won't even watch.
There's a reason I haven't covered the Bucs when they've had those jerseys. I couldn't do it.
Those are so bad.
You know what's great, though? What's not bad at all? Celsius powers active lives every day with essential functional energy, and the new Tropical Vibe is one you've got to check out. But it isn't just the drinks with Celsius. No, they're up with fast protein bars. We got 2 different flavors that they have. 20 grams of protein, low sugar, low carbs, no GMOs. Fast brands living an active lifestyle at the core of who they are, and their goal is to support a better you every day. And with these flavors, the white chocolate cookies and cream and the salted caramel peanut crunch, you really can't go wrong. I've had both of them. I can't believe the taste. I've had tons of protein bars over in my days, but the taste of these things is unbelievable. Really, really, really good stuff. You can actually buy the Amazon Variety Pack. If you go down in the description of this podcast, you'll see a link to the Fast Amazon Variety Pack. Go click on that. Get yourself a variety pack and try both of these flavors because they are both outstanding. Silky smooth layers, deliciousness in these bars is off the charts. So make sure you get yourself some fast protein bars and try those out today. All right, we got a lot to talk about on this show, Mark, because before the jerseys and the creamsicles even happened, we're 7 minutes into the show now, and we didn't even have that on the itinerary, and because that dropped right before the show, and so we'll obviously continue to talk about that as it gets closer to that time. But we've got plenty of time until the 2022 season when that's going to be relevant. But we are going back in time today, and we are talking about our top 10 Bucs of all time. You've compiled your list. I've compiled my list. We have not talked about these lists with each other at all. This has been this has very much been an individual thing. So we'll see kind of where both of us come down on this. But I'd say, do we start at number 1 or do we start?
No, we got a 10. We got to go backwards and go that way. Now, here's the problem, John. I left my list in the other room. I've got to go grab it real quick. I think I've got it all memorized, but I made some changes from 7 to 10, quite a few. So as I was thinking about it, so give me 2 seconds to grab it. This is real professional right now. I'm going to walk off the camera. So maybe you can talk for a minute, John. Sorry.
I'll banter here for myself for a second. I had a harder time putting together this list than Mark did, obviously, because Mark covered the team, at this time, and he's grown up in the area. And so he's seen a lot more of some of the older Bucs than I have. And I know, Leroy Selman's going to be one that he's going to want to be higher on than me. I know he's one I've had to go back, watch highlight videos of, watch and kind of study his game and know where he should be ranked in this grouping. But we're also curious to hear from y'all, the fans. Let us know what your top 10 are. Drop it in the chat, or tell us when we're way off on somebody. Tell us somebody who's got to be in there that maybe isn't in on everybody else's top 10 who you've got up there. Let us know what you think on that front, because we will definitely take that all under consideration as we kind of organize our list here. Lance says that you're a Bucs archive yourself at this point, Mark, and that's probably true.
John, I don't mean to brag. And I can't. There are people out here that are even a bigger archive than me. I've seen, watched, attended, listened to on the radio every single Bucs game since the end of 77. In fact, the very first game I watched was the very first win in 1977 when they beat the Saints. I remember specifically that Sunday afternoon. I believe it was a 4:00 game. Me and my dad watched the game, and I thought to myself, man, this is a cool team, and they got cool uniforms. I'm going to start following this team. Little did I know the misery they would cause over the years, and the heartbreak and the heartache, but I got hooked early on. But there are people out there that actually know more. Mark Fisher, that's in the chat right now. Now, you talk about an archivist. He's been around because he's an older guy than me. Mark's tremendous with that kind of stuff. His memory's not quite as sharp as mine because he's older than me, but he's seen it all. He literally has seen it all. I've almost seen it all, but he has seen it all.
All right, let's get these lists started. Now, important to note here, we are going off of these are the career accomplishments. That's what this is. This isn't like, oh, they had one season that was the greatest in Bucs history, so now they're on the list or whatever. At least for my purposes, longevity mattered a little bit more for this. Not saying that you couldn't be in the Ring of Honor, you couldn't be a great Buck without longevity, but for the top 10, I really tried to stick on the side of guys that accomplished things for more than 1 year. So for me, at least, I don't know for Mark, that took Tom Brady off my list because of that. I didn't quite see him, making the list due to that. But number 10 on my list, I'll go first. Number 10 on my list. I don't think he's a player that many people know, but he's a player that I remember from when I was very young, like 6 or 7 maybe. He didn't play with the Bucs very long. But I just remember him. He was just really impressive to me. And his name is Alvin Harper. And I just think he was
I almost. Hang on. Oh, my gosh. you got me on that one. You got me on that one.
Now you got to tell the Alvin. I had to go to Scott and I said, who's a Bucs player that Mark just would just freak out if I put him on the list? He said, you got to tell him Alvin Harper.
Yeah, you got me on that one. Right in mid-drink, too. So,
yeah. Are you going to tell the Alvin Harper story now?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of there are plenty of Alvin Harper stories. The one big story was, and I actually wrote about it, I believe, in one of the throwbacks that I did earlier this year. Alvin Harper, was just a turd of a person. Anybody that was in the Tampa area, he was just a turd of a person. He wasn't good.
I don't know anything about him. Keep in mind, I've never heard of him.
He was a jerk, a major jerk, and he did own a couple of Subway franchises in the area, but he was just a jerk. But number one. A trainer actually cut the tip of his finger off, cutting tape off of his finger one time in a game.
No wonder he was a jerk.
Literally. Well, I mean, that was later on, but he was a jerk before he got here. He was a jerk from Dallas. But he came from Dallas where they were winning Super Bowls, right? And he's dunking over the goalpost and things like that. And he's a star next to Michael Irvin and Troy Aikman and Emmitt Smith. And he comes to Tampa, who was just absolutely dreadful at the time. But I remember his last game and Courtney Hawkins, who was a wide receiver out of Michigan State, his last game. It was the last game of the year. We're in the locker room, and I'm talking to Courtney. And at the time, I don't have this little slick little microphone. I've got literally a cassette-sized tape recorder. That's what we had back then, John. Yeah. Or a notepad that you wrote the quotes actually down. But I wasn't very good writing, so I didn't do that. So I remember talking to Courtney, and I was asking Courtney, he's going to be a free agent coming up. Does he want to go somewhere where he can be, a number one receiver? And all of a sudden I hear out of the, in the corner of his locker was two down from Courtney. And he's like, nah, man, he wants to be a number 2 his whole life. And I look over and it's Alvin. And I'm like, oh, great. I'm like, anyway, so I keep talking to Courtney and he's just piping, just chip, 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 chip. And finally, I don't know why, maybe it's the ginger in me, I just kind of lost it. And I was like, hey, man, can you maybe just shut up for a second so I can talk to Courtney? And he got up in my face and I didn't back down. I'm thinking, here's a payday, right? If Alvin Harper slugs me in the locker room, I'm going to get rich. Because, as bad as he was in football, he was making a lot of money from the Buccaneers. But I told him, I said, while you were dunking in Dallas, I was talking to Courtney since he was a rookie. So I'll keep talking to Courtney. And, why don't you butt out? And Lamar Thomas, who was a receiver from Miami, who was also kind of a turd at the time. He's matured now. And I believe he's the head coach over at Manatee High School now. But he was he was just instigating it. He was laughing and getting other players around. And we draw a crowd at this point, but we're nose to throat because he's considerably taller than I am. But I mean, we're head to head as much as we can be. And finally, the Bucs PR staff comes in and kind of breaks it up, and another player does. But that was
this
really
was what, 97?
95, 6, somewhere around there.
All right, so we're talking
years a long time ago. I don't even know if you were born yet, but that's my that's my
5 or 6
famous Alvin Harper story. What a real jerk this guy was, and I was not going to back down at that point because I dealt with Alvin Harper for a couple years, and he was just surly to the media and just a jerk in real life. I mean, he drove around Tampa on a suspended license. I mean, here's the guy that didn't pay like basic tickets, and I don't know, just a real jerk. But anyway, that's all. Sorry.
Well, I think it's funny too, because what we'll do at some point is this summer, over the next month or so, is we'll go back and we'll do the most disappointing Bucs of all time, whether it was drafts or free agents. Obviously, just doing the worst guys wouldn't make sense because there's guys that barely made the team, but we do the most disappointing. Like, expectations were here, delivery was here, and I know people have already mentioned Chris Baker in the chat, and that would be one that makes sense for sure. But anyway, that's something we can go back. Let's get the actual list started now. Apologies for derailing that. I had told Stott.
I had to throw this one up real quick. Sorry, Smile Game.
Smile
Certainly
Game.
not a fan of Mark Cook. That's okay.
Smile Game is triggered by the story there. So my top 10 list actually ends with James Wilder. We've talked about him a lot recently. One of the things I've noted as I've watched him and looked at some of the things that he did in games and highlights and things was it was really noteworthy to me how much he caught the ball in his career at that point in time. He was kind of ahead of his time in that way, like that he would have the receiving production that he did for Tampa Bay over all those years. I mean, he really, as a receiver, I think he had almost 2,000. I think he was over. Where was he in his career? Yeah, 3,500 yards receiving in his career, and almost all of that, all but 8 yards of that was in Tampa Bay. Averaging 8 yards a catch. I mean, those are great numbers for a back. Obviously, as a rusher, he had 2 great seasons in terms of production, some other solid years. Fumbling was just a massive issue for him. I actually asked Scott about that. I was like, why was fumbling such a huge issue for this guy? And you might even remember that, Mark, but fumbling was unbelievable for him. He fumbled 29 times in those 3 best years that he had for the Bucs.
Guys fumbled a lot back in the 80s.
That's what Scott said. He said,
they carried the ball differently. I mean, you could hit a guy and try and, take his head off. I mean, it was a different era of football. It was a more physical era of football. And let's not forget, this was a guy who set the NFL record for most carries in a season. And at one point had the most carries in a game. I mean, he was just a workhorse. By the end of the game, I mean, this guy was just dog tired. And I wrote in today's hook column the 3 players that I'd like to see in the Ring of Honor, James Wilder being one of them, that if you look up the picture of workhorse in the dictionary, it should have James Wilder's picture there, because he was such a workhorse for this Tampa Bay football team. No doubt about it. One of my favorite players, and just a great guy too.
Yeah, no, for sure. He was one that to me, I looked at the list and I was like, you know what? Obviously, there were some Bucs running backs in contention, and I'm not saying that none of them will be on the list when we get to the end, but, that was definitely he was one of the ones that stood out to me just in terms of his production. And also, he played on terrible teams. We played on really, really bad teams, and he was still a standout. So I wonder if he had played on some of the teams that Dunn and Alstott played on, what his production would have looked like.
Lawrence Taylor said he was the best football player ever played against. LT
wow.
said that.
I didn't know that, but I feel great about including him now.
And Bill Parcells, after that same game, it was a 17-14 game against the Buccaneers. Bill Parcells said, I didn't know anything about James Wilder, and I don't care to see him again. And I mean, so that's as good of a compliment as you're going to get from a guy like Bill Parcells. So
that's great. All right, who's number 10 on your list?
I got Mike Evans coming in at number 10. And,
wow.
He's the Bucs all-time leading receiver. I mean, how can we not have him on the list? I could have had him maybe a little bit higher. I went back and looked at the list that Scott and I came up with a few years ago. Yeah, we did the all-time top 25, and Mike, I don't think cracked the top 10 at the time, but I mean, in the meantime, he's only continued to get 1,000 yards a season. I mean, he's an NFL record holder for most consecutive 1,000-yard seasons to start his career, and I don't see why he won't get 1,000 yards this season if he stays healthy. Mike Evans is not only one of my favorite football players to cover because he's such a great guy, but I just love watching the guy on the football field. I love his attitude. I love the way the passion that he plays with, and I think he's already moved into the top 10 of Buccaneers, in my opinion.
Oh yes, very easy. In my opinion, I'm surprised to hear him have there. Now, don't give anything away about your list, but I'm just saying my reaction to your list is, wow, if Evans is 10. To me, he is like by far and away the best offensive player in Bucs history. So I'm thinking you might not have any other offensive players in your top 10, which is certainly possible with the Bucs. There's way more standouts on defense, but we'll see if that's true as we move through the list. But that's my first reaction to it is, wow, where are are there other offensive players? Number 9 for me is Hardy Nickerson. I just think what he meant to the team, and he was a guy that wasn't necessarily like for me, like, I think he was an elite. I think he's a Hall of Fame or anything like that. No, we're the top 8 guys. You might be able to make a case for all of them, but that I have on my list. But for me, it was like, okay, I think Hardy Nickerson was very valuable. I think he was there 6 or 7 years, maybe. Obviously put up great production. He had 7 picks too. The Bucs linebackers were unbelievable at intercepting the football, turnover machines, but also he was just a stabilizing presence, big free agent signing. And there was a lot of expectation there. And I think he really just delivered that and was a really kind of a key guy for some of the younger talents that they brought in there to help guide them and things like that. So I put him in there because I remember watching him. I was young. I was very little. And I remember watching him and just always thinking he was as reliable as it gets. And that would end up
he was a
being
former Steeler. Do you remember him? Yeah, he was a former Steeler.
Well, it was when I was very little at that point, but I know he was a Steeler. Yeah.
Yeah. And Hardy is on my list. I'll give that away. And James Wilder is also on my list, believe it or not. So, but I'm going to talk about Hardy a little bit there. And again, happened to be one of the guys that I wrote about, should be in the Buccaneers Ring of Honor. His production was outstanding through his 6 years with Tampa Bay. I think 93 to 99, 6 or 7 years. I'm not good with math, but the thing that Hardy did is he came to an organization. He came from Pittsburgh, where the standard in Pittsburgh, John.
Yeah.
It was completely different than what the 93 Buccaneers were. And he came in and he saw the old one Buccaneer place where Hugh Culverhouse, not an exaggeration, had a Coke machine in the players' locker room that they had to pay for drinks. Now, Buccaneers locker room, they've got, whatever they want. They got a cafeteria. They don't pay anything. Hugh Culverhouse literally charged the players to buy soda in their own locker room. But anyway, Hardy Nickerson got here and he saw the lax attitude and the lack of a work ethic and just no tradition here in Tampa Bay, and began to rule that locker room with an iron fist. And as I wrote today's thing, and he used that iron fist on a couple players' heads. That's true stories too. I believe it was Eric Curry that he rolled around in the locker room with one day. Because, here's the number 1 draft pick, not, putting out what he should be. I believe it was Eric Curry. Again, I wish Scott was on because he's got a little bit better memory of these things than I do. But he was a guy that wasn't afraid to knock his own players upside the head if they needed it, because he was just disgusted when he got here, when he looked around the locker room and saw the way the organization was run compared to what he saw in Pittsburgh. So I think, we give Tony Dungy the much due and earned credit, and Derek Brooks and Warren Sapp for turning this team around. But Hardy Nickerson was the first guy to make that change. He was a very important cog in seeing this team turn around from the yucks to the Bucs, in other words. And tremendous football player. Again, nice guy, right? We even covered him as a coach for a year under Lovie Smith. And Scott would tell you this too. Hardy's a shy kind of guy. He's got this kind of, real shy smile, and he's not a very loud and boisterous guy. But I've never met a player who turned on the attitude like Hardy Nickerson did when he got on a football field. Again, the nicest guy in the world, but on a football field, he would try and kill you. And he was a leader by example, but also a vocal leader in that Buccaneer locker room, and a terrific player, and definitely deserving of being in the top 10. And again, in the Ring of Honor, no question about it, in my opinion.
Yeah. Pewtercast says Nickerson started a fight in his first preseason game, and that changed the whole team's mindset. Mark Fisher says Nickerson confronted McCants too. I believe it was McCants. Maybe he fought, not maybe Eric Curry. I can't remember. Again,
somebody in the locker room.
50-year-old problems.
Yeah. It may have been both of them. He may have fought both of them at the same time.
Who's number 9 on your list?
Number 9 on my list is James Wilder, who you had
Wilder
number 10.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, Wilder, again, we talked about James, just a tremendous football player. Why he's not in the Ring of Honor right now, I don't understand. I really believe he'll be the next guy inducted into the Ring of Honor. There's been some pressure. His son, James Wilder Jr., that played at Florida State, I've written an article about it. Scott's written an article about it, that he deserves it. And anytime we do, James Wilder's retweeting, and he gets a lot of support from Buccaneer fans who remember James Wilder. I believe truly he'll be in the Buccaneers Ring of Honor. If not next, but very, very soon.
All-time leading rusher, right, in Bucs history, and not
until
touchdowns, but yards.
And receiver until Mike Evans broke that record. I mean, a couple years ago. I mean, he was
receptions
for over 28 years. This
Crazy.
guy, as a running back, was the all-time leader in receptions.
Yeah, and it's really not even close. I mean, the next guy is
Right.
more than 100 behind him, and Mark Carrier.
Yep.
I mean, Evans obviously 102 up on Wilder at this point in time. So so you believe that Wilder is a better than Evans? Like that what surprises me.
I again, I'm looking at it from a perspective, and I'm gonna cheat just a little bit, John, because I'm gonna go back to my fan days to a degree.
To the older ones, yeah.
And the abuse that the era that James Wilder played in versus what Mike Evans played in, what he was required to do, asked to do. He played behind just a dreadful offensive line. I mean, this guy got very little help from his offensive teammates. And he just, all he did was, yes, sir, when the coach asked him to do it, carry the ball 43 times in this game. Okay. He came in '84, he came very close to setting the all-time NFL record for total yards from scrimmage. That was a game, again, before you were born, where John McKay had his defense actually let a team score on the last series so they could get the ball back with about 2 minutes left to try and get James that all-time record. And he ended up falling 16 yards short, but he was a do-it-all, jack of all trades, super guy too.
Interesting. I see some lists going up here, and I know there's some guys on this list that I don't have on here. And I'm wondering now if we're both in agreement. I thought you would have him, but now that I've heard two offensive players, I'm wondering if Mike Alstott shows up on your list. So we'll keep it rolling, and we'll see if he makes that top 10 or not. But for me, number 8 is John Lynch. Yes, he's a Hall of Famer. I think 8 is a good spot for him because the top 8 to me in Bucs history, we're talking about, to me, they're all Hall of Famers. That's how I would see it. To me, Lynch is the one that I think you could have had a fringe player. There's probably an argument for him, probably an argument against him. But he was an enforcer, and we've heard the stories even recently about how he had to step in, and maybe it was after Nickerson too. Some of this, but he had to step in and be kind of the voice of reason as some of these fights broke out in locker room, or Warren Sapp was being the way that we know Warren Sapp can be at times, and he's had to speak up, and he's had to be the one to say things and go to coaches and be that middleman kind of, and he took that upon himself. And those kind of players, I think, really hold locker room together. Most of these guys, we don't have to remind fans how good they were as players. Lynch was obviously a great player, never really the ball hawk type of safety, and that would probably be the argument against him for the Hall of Fame. Obviously, he's in, so it doesn't matter whether there's an argument against him at this point in time. But that would be my case there. But I think he's just a steady, reliable player, and how long he did it. He went to Denver and was a really good player. I mean, that is crazy.
He's in 2 Ring of Honors. He's in 2 Ring of Honors. I mean, that just doesn't happen very often. That's tough to beat,
right?
Yeah.
He's 8 for me.
Lynch is on my list. I'll go with my number 8, and you mentioned it. You gave it away just a second ago. Mike Alstott's number 8 on my list. And as far as a true running back, James Wilder is probably better. But what Mike Alstott, again, meant to the franchise when you look at him coming in, the year that he did, and being part of that turnaround of a franchise, giving the offense a little bit of identity, a defensive-based team. Listen, let's be honest. They won the Super Bowl with a tremendous defense and an efficient offense. But Mike Alstott was such a fan favorite, a work pal type guy, just came to work every day. And here's a story about Mike Alstott. His very first preseason game, he missed it because Mike was a second-round draft pick in '96, if I remember right. But he was down in the dumps. They were playing the Miami Dolphins in that preseason game, and one of the coaches like, "Hey, man, what's going on?" I mean, the guy was almost in tears, and Mike said, "I can't play. I got a little hamstring injury." And the guy was like, "Okay, well, you can play next week." He said, "Yeah, but I need to make this football team." And the coach laughed and said, "Mike, you're going to make the football team. You were a second-round draft pick." But I mean, the stories are legendary of Mike Alstott back in college at Purdue. One of his work. I mean, he was remember in Rocky IV when he goes to Russia and he doesn't have any equipment, so he's got to chop logs and lift trees and things. That was Mike Alstott back in college, pushing his Jeep in neutral up a hill. True stories, and that's why his thighs were as massive as they were. Again, love Mike Alstott. What he's done in the community might be just as good as what he did on the football field for the Tampa Bay area. But in my opinion, Mike Alstott certainly a top 10 member of the Buccaneers. 7, 8-time Pro Bowl or whatever it was. Now, again, that's a little bit of a cheat because he was never a true fullback. It was him and Warwick Dunn alternating at tailback for the most part. He wasn't ever a true fullback, but he got elected to the Pro Bowl as a fullback multiple times. But just a tremendous guy and still a great member of the Tampa Bay community with his service work that he does.
Obviously, Mike Alstott is going to have a fond place in Bucs fans' hearts. There's no question about that, I think. I just looked at it from a perspective. I'm well aware of. I mean, I remember all stuff when I was a kid. I actually watched him a ton. I remember him from every highlight reel at night. When Chris Berman would do the highlights, he had all the the
Right.
big runs and he'd run people over. He was a tone setter, no question. Short yardage goal line. They were hard. It was hard to stop him. He caught the ball always well too. He's a good, well-rounded player. I would have had him in probably at 11 or 12 probably for me. I didn't put him on the list. I just didn't feel like it was enough production there to actually say that he was that big of a difference maker. But from the sentimental standpoint of it, I think fans really loved what he did. And obviously he was there for a long time, the way he played the game. I think, that was a big thing for that Bucs team at that time because they didn't have this great explosive offense. So they needed a finisher and a closer, and they needed a guy who could score every time they were in the red zone. And that's what
John,
he did those things.
You ask every offensive lineman, and I've asked them this question over the years: what gets you more amped up, 80-yard touchdown bomb or a running back that bowls over three guys for a 30-yard touchdown run? And it's not even close. I mean, they love to see a guy just roll another guy, right? To open up enough of a hole that they could roll a guy. And Mike Alstott was that guy. I mean, I remember sitting in the fans, just as in the stands as a fan. And you just when he would get the ball and get through the initial line of scrimmage, everybody just stood up because you knew a linebacker or a safety was going to get rolling backwards. I mean, he was just a highlight reel to watch, and a tremendous receiver out of the backfield. I believe he led the team his rookie year as a receiver out of the backfield with over 70 catches, where he played a more traditional fullback role.
Right. His rookie year, he definitely caught the ball. I mean, there's no question they used him a good bit. And Mark Fisher said, he always says, we'll donate on site, by the way. So this is funny that he follows up a typical statement with Lenyard, and he spells my name wrong. Lenyard needs to be fired for that blasphemy on Alstott. I know he's not the only one. The chat is turned against me completely with the Alstott thing, and I knew that they would. I'm well aware. I mean, Alstott obviously there's a fondness in Bucs fans' hearts, and I think if any team that he played for would probably say that, and so I think maybe it's a testament to the guys I have ahead of them that I think they're that good that they'd be ahead of Alstott. But to me, number 7 on my list was Leroy Selman. There's going to be some.
Whoa! You got me with Alvin Harper, okay? But
this is serious, though.
This is. I'm with Fisher on this. I'm calling our owner right now and having you removed. This is just.
I'm telling 7. 7 is fine, man.
I feel like Fred
highly
Sanford.
Productive.
Oh my God.
Highly productive. I think he could have been effective in any era. He was a game changer, but I got to know how he's better than Simeon Rice. I need you to tell me what happened. Simeon Rice is a king, dude. Simeon Rice was a difference maker. He was in an era that if Simeon Rice played even 5 years later, he would have been in the top 10 sacks all time. That's how good he was.
So would Leroy Selman. You talk about Leroy Selman. You talk about playing in an era where they didn't throw the damn football. You got to think 1976, this guy. Number 1, the very first draft pick all time of the franchise of a terrible team. There was no, we're going to give you some of the better players from other teams. I mean, you just had to build a team from the cast-offs from bad football teams and draft. And that's why the Buccaneers rise from 0-26 to NFC Central champs in 1979, 4 years later, is just so incredible. Is they just didn't have any help from the league like new franchises get these days. Leroy Selman absolutely dominated his position in his era, and they didn't even start with sacks, right, as a statistic until 1982. So we don't know how many sacks Leroy Selman would have had from 76 to 1982. If it wasn't for a back injury, which it was a herniated disc that he suffered in the Pro Bowl in 1984, he probably would have played another 3 or 4 years, and he would have been a first ballot Hall of Famer most likely because he was still in his prime, playing well in 84. This guy he's Mr. Buccaneer. There's just no question about it. I mean, the guy.
Don't give away where he is on your list.
Well, I'm not, but
Okay.
I can say he's a lot higher than number 7 on my list. I'll give you that right there.
Look,
I mean,
everybody ahead of him is a Hall of Famer or should be. So I don't know what's the big
I,
deal. We're talking about the
I,
elite of the elite here. He's
I
ahead of a
mean,
Hall of Famer. Like
he may.
we're
An
talking
argument
about
could be
this is
made, and
seven great
if
players.
you watch Leroy Selman, if you watched him play, and again, I understand you weren't even born yet, so it's impossible for you. If
It's
you
true.
watch Leroy Selman play, there's an argument to be made that he is the best of all time for the Buccaneers. And the guy was just dominant. I mean, he was unblockable one-on-one. Again, John, I joked in the our group chat earlier that I've got several DVDs of Leroy Selman from VHS tapes that were transferred over. Thank you very much. I won't mention the guy's name because then all the Buccaneer fans will be begging him for DVD copies. But anyway, good friend who supplied me with these. He was just unblockable one-on-one. And I joked in our group chat that I would loan you a DVD player and loan you some of these DVDs. And I'm not even joking anymore. I'm going to deliver you a DVD player and some of these DVDs. Okay, good. I'm going to deliver you some of these DVDs. In fact, I'm going to have our guy make you some of Leroy's best games, and you will come back in a month and you will apologize to every Buccaneer fan on the Pewter Report podcast for your ridiculously low ranking of Mr. Buccaneer.
7 behind 6 guys that should be in the Hall of Fame. Oh man, the hate is strong. I think he was a great player, but I think there is a world of difference between offensive linemen at that point in time and offensive linemen in today's game. I think there's a world of difference. So I definitely equate that. It is very hard to compare across eras. Everything I've seen of Leroy Selman, which is really the YouTube things that you've sent me and stuff. I do think he could have played in any era. I do say that about him, and that's why I even have him besides I do, because I think I don't think that's true of a lot of defensive linemen. I think he could have. But man, I don't know. I think 7's a pretty great spot for him. I think everybody ahead of him is an absolute baller, and I think people are still hating on Simeon Rice, and we'll get to that in a second. But who's 7 on your list?
I can't even concentrate right now.
Bob Hanks is with you. They say, bro, this dude has no clue putting Selman at 7 when he's Mr. Buck. Simeon didn't even play here that long. Get this young dude out of here. LOL.
And you just gave away my number 7. It was Simeon Rice. And
all right, so we're pretty close on that.
I like Simeon Rice a lot. And again, if you read my hook column today, which I looked at the numbers right before I came on, and not many people did yet, so just go click the article for me, please, if you don't want to read it. But Simeon Rice was my 3rd player that deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, the Ring of Honor. And there's a very good case to be made for being a Hall of Fame player. I mean, the guy had over 120 career sacks, but he had 69.5 with the Buccaneers. Just a terrific guy. A space cadet. He was a fun guy to cover. I didn't cover him as much as Scott did. I was kind of in and out during the Simeon Rice years. As far as being a reporter, but you can't argue with the production. I mean, he was here for 2001 to 2006, and until his last season that he was injured, he had double-digit sacks every single year. I mean, including 115.5 and 115 sack, and that was coming off 2 years before that in Arizona where he had 16.5. I mean, the guy was a tremendous athlete, just a tremendous athlete, and worked very hard at his craft. It's a shame that he got injured, didn't pass the physical. The Buccaneers ended up cutting him after the 2006 season. There were even rumors a few years ago Simeon Rice wanted to come back at like age 46 or something like that.
He's one of the freaks, man.
And if you look at the guy, and I've seen him since then, he looks like he could still play in the league, believe it or not. I mean, he's still a specimen of a man. But he was my number 7. And you know what? I actually had Tom Brady on my list initially at number 7. And I know you kind of prefaced this with, we're not going to do you were going with a lot of the longevity part of things. And Tom's a 1-year wonder so far, but I mean, it's hard to keep Tom Brady off of a top 10 list, but he is off my, he's one more year, another Super Bowl. He's definitely in the top 10.
I was going to say that at the end of the show, maybe too, and we'll keep it moving here because I know we're already almost 39 minutes into the show. But yeah, we got to maybe touch real quick on guys who could get into this list still that are current Bucs. But yeah, Simeon Rice was 6 for me. Just to add one more thing about him, I think Simeon Rice is one of the most underrated players in NFL history. I don't understand. I mean, the production's unbelievable at 2 different places. I know the Bucs fans might say, well, he didn't play here long enough to consider it. And fine, if that's an argument you want to make, there's probably pros and cons for all the arguments with these guys. That's why we're making a top 10 list of all time.
Right.
But yeah, to me, I thought he was just an absolute difference maker. I mean, he played really when he played, the NFL was starting to become more of a passing league, but like it's not like it is today where like getting double-digit sacks is, everybody does that. If you're halfway decent, you usually get double-digit sacks or at least, have tons of pressures or in close position to. He was just incredible. I mean, out of his 6 seasons with the Bucs, what you mentioned all but the the injured one, he had 11 or more sacks. He had 14 or more 3 times. He hit the 15 mark twice. And then you go back to his time in Arizona, he had the 16.5 sack season. It was double digits, high double digits every year. He was dominant. Even when he didn't play with another dominant player, but obviously playing with Sapp certainly helped him. But he was just, I mean, he to me, he was like, offensive lineman couldn't handle Simeon Rice, really. Like if the league had been more of a passing league, I really think he'd have been a first ballot Hall of Famer. I mean, he still should be. I think he's 20th all time in sacks, and we don't even talk about Simeon Rice as a Hall of Famer. Like you said, he was unbelievable for the Bucs. He was unbelievable in Arizona when he played. I mean, he had 51 and a half sacks in Arizona. I mean, so the team was terrible, So I just think he was an absolute monster. Like you said, the athleticism to play. Yeah, he might not have been an elite run defender, but you were talking about a game-changing type of pass rusher. I just don't think he ever got talked about enough, and maybe it's because he finished his career on a great defense with a lot of other big names, but I think anybody who watches him, it's like, look at the way that guy turns the corner, gets after the quarterback. I mean, he was just always a player.
Great length, too. I mean, he had tremendous length and a wingspan.
Yeah.
The amount of fumbles that this guy forced over his career. And I'll tell you this, I don't think anybody's ever looked this up, but it'd be interesting if somebody did. I don't know that there was a Buccaneer defensive player, a defensive lineman who had more pass breakups, meaning batting the ball down to the line of scrimmage. If he didn't get there, he was going to knock the ball down. I mean,
you're right. 2002, he had 11. In the year before 8, the year after 8. That's crazy numbers. That it would be like league leading today. I don't know what it was those years, but today I think that usually the league leading defensive lineman has about 8 or 7 or 8. So that's crazy. 3 straight years like that. He's just a difference. I mean, 6 forced fumbles twice as a Buck. Had 4 another year, 8 one year. That was a forced 5 1 year with Arizona. He knew how to play the game. He changed.
He had like 7 career interceptions too. I mean, that's.
He had 5 career interceptions for a defensive lineman.
Yeah.
I just think he was a game-changing player, and there aren't many like game-changing players that just don't we don't talk about him in the Hall of Fame. We just don't. Right. He doesn't get brought up. I think it's a shame. I think he's an absolute Hall of Famer. That's how I feel about him. So anyway,
I agree with that.
We got to keep moving to find number 5 or number 6. Is this number 6 for you? Who's number 6?
Yeah, number 6 for me. And again, once you get here, these 1 through 6 for me are not true. The first 2 aren't interchangeable, but after that, the 4, 5, 6 is kind of interchangeable. I've got Rondé Barber at number 6, and again, Rondé Barber was never going to wow anybody with his athletic prowess. Although he'll remind you that he was like an NCAA 100-yard dash champion at some point or something like that. I mean, he was a pretty fast sprinter guy in college, but his football IQ, what he meant to this franchise, and again, as far as in terms of covering a guy, sitting down and talking to him and picking his brain, very few better than Rondé Barber. Again, he could be as high as 4 on my list. I've got him at 6, but just a tremendous football player, and deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. The amount of interceptions and sacks he had, he created a position, right? Monty Kiffin and that defense created a position. He was a hybrid defensive back, hybrid linebacker, slot corner. He played on the outside some, but he was tremendous against the run. He got to the quarterback. He was smart, and nobody will ever be able to take away what he meant to this franchise in 2002 when he returned that Donovan McNabb pass to send the Buccaneers to the Super Bowl. I mean, I've cried watching the Buccaneers several times when they lost when I was a kid. But as far as joy, that was the only time maybe my eyes watered up, because when he picked him off and went 92 yards and I realized this team's going to the Super Bowl, it was probably the more emotional than the Buccaneers winning the Super Bowl last year, more emotional than them beating the Raiders. The fact that they were going. Rondé Barber will always have a strong place in my heart for that. And again, you add in the fact that he's just a super, super guy. You'll get to meet him. He'll be out at training camp,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll come away just as impressed as all of us are when you get a chance to spend a few minutes with Rondé Barber.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that for sure. Number 5 for me is Mike Evans. Not a lot that needs to be added. To me, best offensive player in Bucs history by a country mile. I don't think anybody else is even close. What he's done to start his career, I mean, obviously never been done before. Crazy at that position that he's done it. Crazy with some of the erratic quarterback play he's gotten over the years that he's done it. Even going, look, his rookie season could have been his best season, and he had Josh McCown and whoever throwing him the ball that year. I mean, I think he's incredible. I think what he's done, consistency, taking care of his body, obviously as a person, as a leader, never complain. I mean, to go through the teams that he's gone through and to be on those teams and the organization when it looked as lost as it did, he's like Lavonte to me. Like the fact that they've had 2 guys like that, we'll never be able to say enough about what it meant to the team eventually being able to put together a Super Bowl championship out of that group. He's a special player to me. All right, who's number 5 for you?
I've got Hardy Nickerson up at number 5. And again, he's a guy that, when he actually moved up my list a little bit from when I originally did this list with Scott several years ago, or a few years ago. Again, when you go back and look at some of the things that he did and what he meant to this franchise, again, I'm including that a little bit in there. He was a catalyst to the success and the turnaround of this franchise in the mid to late 90s. Hardy Nickerson was important to this football team, deserves to be in the Buccaneers Ring of Honor, and he will be. And let's not forget he coached too here, and he was even a radio commentator with Gene Deckerhoff for a couple years with the Buccaneers. So Hardy Nickerson, great guy and a tremendous football player, but very important to this franchise, and he's number 5 on my list.
Number 4 for me is Lavonte David. I think Lavonte David should absolutely be a Hall of Famer. The NFL just basically blew it for years with the Pro Bowl, and I think it's probably going to affect whether he should be in or not. I don't know many people that would have actually watched Lavonte David that wouldn't say this is a Hall of Fame talent. And I'm not saying it because I cover the Bucs. I've said this before I ever covered the Bucs. It's one of the few players across the league. There's always a couple in an era that slipped through, and maybe it's because of Kuechly and Wagner and those teams doing what they did. Obviously, Panthers going to Super Bowl. They were a good team throughout those years, and that maybe that's why Seattle obviously had plenty of good teams. I don't know why we can't just honor more dudes, but that's how the league does things. That's how fans see things a lot of time, and for whatever reason, I mean, 128 tackles for loss. I mean, to me, that's like the most impactful thing a linebacker can do, that and cover. And he blows away. I know they didn't necessarily track it as much when Brooks played, but, just blows away the competition in that regard. Like, just had unbelievable numbers. He's done it as a blitzer. He's been an elite coverage guy. Not only is he an elite coverage guy statistically when you watch tape, but he allows them to be able to do things defensively that other teams can't do because they don't have somebody like Lavonte David. Special player, special person. Again, like I said about Evans, you can't say enough about those 2 guys sticking it out, being what they were to the franchise for as long as they were, and what it's meant to them being in the Super Bowl. So number 4 for you is
John Lynch. I've got him higher than you had, John Lynch.
Wow, you do, yeah.
When you watch John Lynch played football for this team, he played in an era where NFL highlight videotapes were one of the top rented things at Blockbuster Video, John. That's, again, how old I am. The NFL promoted the hits, right? Now they run and hide from it, and you can't hit anybody at all. And unless you try and tackle their ankles. But John Lynch had a quote one time that when he tackled a guy, he wasn't tackling the guy that he tackled. He was trying to get through the guy's body to tackle somebody behind him. I mean, he envisioned needing to go through the ball carrier to get to somebody else. I mean, the guy was a total maniac on the football field. And again, as I mentioned with another player, Hardy Nickerson, super nice guy off the football field. I mean, and you see John Lynch in a locker room without a shirt on. He's in good shape, but he's not certainly this chiseled machine of a man.
Interesting. Yeah.
But just what he did on the football field. Again, if Mike Alstott got the fans standing on their feet offensively, it was John Lynch who did the same thing defensively, because he was a human highlight reel in terms of hits. And you can still fortunately go back and look on YouTube and find some video of him. And then what you mentioned earlier, the fact that he was able to go to Denver and be productive, still and be a member of their Ring of Honor. Even his success as a GM in the league, which I thought was a terrible hire initially, tells you why I don't know anything about football right there. John Lynch has been tremendous in San Francisco. But John Lynch is number 4 on my list. He's, again, there's some interchangeable things here. Lavonte David is not on my list. I'm just going to say it. And it's not that there's several guys that could be in the top 10. He was one of those fringe guys for me.
Okay, listen, if people are going to lose it about Leroy Selman, this man doesn't have David in the top 10. Please, you got to ether this man. You cannot let this go, Bucs fans. This man is a living legend.
I love Lavonte David. There's no question about it. I just, and when it's all said and done, he'll probably be in my top 10. I'll probably throw a James Wilder down the list.
31.
I'm
beside myself.
I couldn't fit them all in, John. I couldn't fit them all in. I've got a 46-year history of watching this team and the effect that they had. And
Alstott averaged like 2 yards a carry for like most of his career.
Come on, that's David just not true. And I'll say this, and this is a thing that Scott brings up a lot when we talk about Gerald McCoy, who also is not on my list. Gerald McCoy will be a Ring of Honor player one day for the Buccaneers, but he never made the playoffs. And Scott puts a lot of weight in that. Up until this year, Lavonte David played a long time and was not a playoff.
He's a linebacker.
I get it. I'm not saying you're wrong. I don't.
People agree with you. That's how ridiculous. Well, some people hate it, and then other people agree with you. Greg agrees with you. Richard agrees with David.
Yeah.
Bucs fans, you're part of the problem. This is why these guys not going to the Hall of Fame.
Pewtercast is losing his mind. I don't know if that's Brett or if that's Ren or
that's Ren,
Steve,
I think,
or whoever it is. I don't know. But
David is confused. Chad thinks he's a generational linebacker. Mike Reynolds is fuming. I think Bud meant to say absurd. I'm not sure. He said absorb. Maybe he's just absorbing all this.
Again, this is a subjective list. You know what I mean? And again,
but that's we need Scott's opinion on this. We need a tiebreaker.
All right. You know what? I wonder if Scott's listening right now. Do you know?
He probably isn't. They're doing some party at his house, I think. His voice, his voice.
But he can at least text us and tell us.
He's trying to get out of his top 10 so Bucs fans don't come after him. He doesn't want Rand.
Wait. Can we give away what Scott's going to be doing in July?
Yeah, Scott's going to be ranking. What is he? Top 25 all time?
Yeah, he's going to be doing a 1 through 25 starting July 1st through the 25th. So
Buccaneers fans
we'll get to see where he has Lavonte David ranked.
Yep.
If he's getting closer down to number 9, 10, 11, or if he's going to be a top 5 guy like John has.
I got to move on. Rondé Barber's number 3 for me.
Okay. There's only a couple more spots left.
Rondé Barber's number 3 for me. I listed it with Simeon Rice. To me, they're both baffling. It's the Bucs, and that's why they're not in the Hall of Fame. We don't need to say more than that. People know what I mean. They never got the respect. It's the reason David won't go. It's the reason that Simeon Rice doesn't even get talked about. It's the reason Rondé isn't in right now. All those guys are Hall of Fame talents. I've watched the NFL for years. I don't even have an affinity to the Bucs. I'm not biased when I say this. Rondé Barber created a position, redefined the position. The position is one of the more valuable positions in the NFL today, is having guys that can play in the nickel. He put up unreal production. He was a great blitzer. He was an unbelievable run defender. He won Super Bowls. He made Pro Bowls. He was an all-pro. He made big plays in big moments. He's an unbelievable person. He's a great off-field track record. There's just no reason in the world why Rondé Barber shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. It's absurd. The only reason is that he's a Buck, and it's just that's what happens with some teams. They fly under the radar, and it's a shame, and he'll be in there someday, but it's just frustrating that hasn't happened yet because he should be in there. Rondé Barber, number 3 for me. Who's number 3 for you?
Briar Greaves.
Let's go.
Briar Greaves is number 3. And you know what? Actually, let's be honest. If we're ranking top insurance companies in the Tampa Bay area, Briar Greaves would be number 1 on the list. And Briar and Sam do a tremendous job. And I guarantee you Briar Greaves would agree with me on Leroy Selman because Briar's old like me and he's seen the Buccaneers play.
But what do you agree with you on Lavonte David?
He might disagree with me on that. Sam would tend to agree with you because he's a young buck like you.
He's a young pup.
Yeah. So anyway, but Briar Greaves has been doing this for 31 years, guys. You don't stay in business for 31 years if you're not doing something right. Hurricane season is coming up. You need to get your property protected. Make sure you've got enough coverage. The last thing we want to see is a major storm come through the Bay Area. But John, we're due. The Tampa Bay area is due for a major hurricane. We've ducked and been lucky for years and decades now. It's going to eventually happen. And the last thing you want to do is to find out you don't have enough coverage to replace your property, your structures, your home, your business, your automobile. Briar Greaves can do that for you. Just give them a call at 813-876-4166. Again, 813-876-4166. Give Briar, Sam, Diana, anybody in the office a call. Let them know that you just want to compare. You want to shop around. List them. Tell them what you've got for homeowners, what you have for auto, what you have for life. Let them shop around. They'll call you back. They'll tell you if they can save you some money. Chances are they can. But if they can't, they'll just tell you that you're in a good spot. You need to stay where you are because they're not just trying to take your money. They want to develop a long-term relationship with you. And honesty goes a long way, in my opinion, when you're dealing with an insurance company. It's not a 1-800-BOX number that you're calling. You're calling a personal line. You're speaking to those guys directly. BriarGreaves.com or 813-876-4166. 31 years in business, doing something right. I didn't even have to read anything. That's just off the top of my head.
That's just off the top of your head. That's how much you love it. I get it.
I love it. I love Brady.
What did I say about Paul Gruber? Mark's getting after me. Like Mark Fisher's getting after me saying I didn't say anything about Paul Gruber.
No, you didn't say anything about Paul Gruber. And this is another guy like Lavonte David. And again, when we get to the end, and we've got a few more minutes here, when we get to the end, I've got 5, 6, 7 guys on a list that could have. You could argue could be top 10 guys, but anyway.
I'm interested in hearing who your guys are that aren't on the list. Number 2 and number 1 are probably going to be the same for both of us. But number 2 for me is Warren Sapp. I think he's maybe he's got a conversation being for the best defensive tackle of all time. Talented player. You could easily say it was Sapp. I'll go number 1 too. I'll just get my top 2 out of the way. Derek Brooks is number 1 for me because I think he changed the way the league plays the linebacker position, his coverage ability, his range, but also he was an elite leader. He was a great tackler. There's nothing he's bad at. He's one of the all-time greats at that position that has, by the way, a ton of all-time greats, probably more than defensive tackle even does in terms of pass rushers. Sapp redefined pass rushing as a defensive tackle. He was a penetrating type. He was not the build of some other defensive tackles that you've maybe seen in other years. He was a dominant, elite tier player on the field. The thing that edged it for me was just Brooks was just a little bit more stable as a leader, character guy. And so that edged it for me. But you could have either of those guys in the top spot. Both of them those are the all-time 2 greatest Bucs, in my opinion.
Well, you didn't let me give me my number 3.
Oh, I didn't? You didn't give 3?
No, I didn't give 3 because it would have been Derek Brooks is my number 3 guy. Love Derek Brooks. He's a Florida State guy. I loved him in college. I loved him when the Buccaneers drafted him here in Tampa Bay in 1995. Just a tremendous guy, tremendous football player. Again, like you said, kind of revolutionized that position to a degree. His ability to drop into coverage. I mean, he wasn't a guy, highlight reel, hit you kind of guy, although he could thump you. I guarantee you didn't want to get hit by him. However, he's again, these 3 are fairly interchangeable. My 3, Derek Brooks at number 3. I've got Leroy Selman at number 2. And Warren Sapp is my number 1 guy. And again, you could, tomorrow I may say Leroy Selman, but to me, Warren Sapp was just the most dominant guy at his position for such a long time. Right. Nasty attitude, love to come out, antagonize the other team. I guess I'm one of those kind of people that like to be like that. Again, my buddy Spencer Robinson is listening to the podcast now, and he remembers when we used to play backyard football. I used to like to pick fights and talk a lot of smack, and I was just kind of a jerk, kind of like I am now, John. Actually, I haven't changed a lot in my 50 years, but Warren Sapp, I got a little Sapp in me too. He's just a dirty, not dirty, but just kind of a, when he played football, he played with an edge, and I love that about Warren Sapp. Just a tremendous football player. I loved watching him. Leroy Selman, again, you had him at number 7, which, again, grounds for firing. We're going to take a vote as soon as this show's over and come up with your severance package. But Leroy, number 2, Mr. Buccaneer. There's no question about it. I mean, there's a reason. There's an entire freeway named after him. It's called the Leroy Selman Expressway. I mean, they don't just do that for any Tom, Dick, and Harry out there, okay?
Well, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but he was like the only good player they had for 30 years. So that probably plays a
which means that he should actually be higher because he was a great player on a bad football team for a long time. Although, let's not forget, 79, 81, 82, he was a playoff football player. And again, tremendous guy in the community. Here's the deal about Leroy Selman in the offseason. Again, they talk about the old time versus the new time. The old time guys, some of these guys had jobs in the offseason. Leroy Selman worked in the offseason at a bank, right? I mean, he was preparing for life after football during his football career, and he went on to become the athletic director for USF. Help institute that football program there. Who knows if there's football at USF today? Taylor Jenkins somewhere is smiling without Leroy Selman. Plus, of all the guys I've ever interviewed in my entire life, I've never interviewed a guy more nice or more polite than Leroy Selman. In 1993, 94, I was a nobody. I got a press credential because I worked at a radio station, and I didn't get paid to go out there, but I did it on my own. And I remember Leroy Selman was at a Buccaneer practice at the old one Buccaneer place out on the patio, literally where the weights were. They weren't inside the building. They were outside on a patio where the weight room was. And we were watching practice one day. I don't remember if it was an OTA or a mini camp or something like that. And I was a nobody, and I was so scared to go up and ask him if he would interview me. Guy spent 20 minutes just talking to me like I was Ed Werder, or I was Chris Mortensen, or I was somebody important. That's the kind of guy Leroy Selman was. Treated everybody with the utmost respect. And again, nicest guy in the world off the football field, but once the football pads came on, you didn't want to stand in the way of Leroy Selman. So Sapp, Selman, Brooks, again, those three are really interchangeable. I will tell you right now, Scott's favorite football player of all time is Rondé Barber, but he believes Derek Brooks was a little bit better than Warren Sapp. But anyway, it's all opinion at this point.
Sneak peeks into Scott. Now, a lot of people have asked about Paul Gruber. Well, mainly a couple of the people who've watched him at that point in time. Here's my situation with Paul Gruber. I remember when I was a kid, obviously was when Gruber played. And I remember he was one of the few Bucs at that time that everybody kind of knew was a good player, and at that point, especially on offense. And I wanted his card. I actually was one of those weird kids. I didn't want the autographed famous players cards. I wanted like everybody for every team. And at that time, it was harder to get Bucs than most teams in terms of cards even. So I wanted a Gruber card because he was one of the better players at that point in time. One of the players I knew at that point. I was young, so I didn't know that many given offensive linemen. And I got his card, and I remember that, and remember just being pumped about it. And I still have it. It's in my closet over here, his card. But anyway, I say all that to say I knew Gruber was a good player. I obviously did not watch offensive line play like I do now when I was that age. And there's not like Paul Gruber highlights laying around. So I was just at a huge disadvantage with Gruber. I just asked Scott if he'd have him in the top 10, or I showed Scott my 10 and he didn't mention Gruber should be in there. So I just didn't have him in my top 10. So kind of blame Scott if he should be in there. I know you didn't have him either. So I trust you guys more than anybody, but I think he was 11, 12, 13. I think he's in that range. If you put him at 9 or 10, would I care? To me, the top 8 are the top 8. I wouldn't change anything in my top 8. After that, Nickerson, I think I like him at 9. I think you could put Wilder or Alstott or Gruber at 10. Those were all good players. There's probably an argument for Gerald McCoy out there. I didn't really consider him, but there's probably an argument for that out there. There were other good players, but who do you have? Other guys I didn't mention. Do you have anybody that I didn't mention that you think?
Not really. I mean, again, looking at my list, the first one I had outside the top 10 was Paul Gruber, Lavonte David. And then I had, Mark Carrier was good, but it was kind of a brief window there. He was a really good football player for this team. Jimmy Giles is in the Ring of Honor.
I was going to ask you about him.
Jimmy was a great tight end. And again, in an era when they didn't throw the football to tight ends a lot. I mean, this guy still is tied with the most touchdowns in a game with 4 touchdown receptions that he had against the Miami Dolphins in 1985. I mean, he just dominated the Dolphins that day. The Buccaneers ended up losing, I think, 41-38 in that game. But Giles was the guy. Gerald McCoy, another guy. Dave Logan, again, old Buccaneer fans will remember Dave Logan as a nose tackle for this team in that 3-4 defense. Went on to a long radio career. Died suddenly several years ago in the offseason. Young, thought to be healthy, had a deep vein thrombosis, a blood clot that went to his lung and killed him. Another guy, the Buccaneers said Charlie Hanna at one point went on to have a better career once he left Tampa Bay. There's a lot of fringe guys that we could probably have on this list, but I think my top 10 is pretty solid. That yours isn't awful, except for the Leroy pick. That's just bad.
We both have something outrageous, apparently. Like I can't believe the David thing, but we both have something that triggered the other, which is what I was hoping for. I didn't want the full list to trigger it, but I wanted both of us to be triggered by something, and that was successful. We did that. So great job by us. Somebody asked, Greg asked, which current Buck makes the top 5 after his career is over outside of Mike Evans? We can go down the Vita Vea, Devin White path if we want. Those guys are so early in their career.
Yeah.
It's easy to say that. We could say it about Winfield. We could say it about Carlton Davis. We could say it
about Chris Godwin, maybe. I mean,
right.
Who knows? You're right.
Yeah.
Wait, Ali Marpet. I mean, there's a guy that's probably, could be a top 10 guy when it's all said and done.
And I'm going to be honest. I know I said longevity, but if Brady goes out and wins another Super Bowl or just balls out for the next 2 years and gets them deep into the playoffs, I mean, he's going to not only be in there, but he's going to be high for me. Like that's
if Tristan Wirfs gives up 1 sack over the next 10 years, averaging just 1 sack, he's top 5. I mean,
right. As I say that about White and Vea career, the way Tristan Wirfs started his career, like that's insane. That's like the mark of a guy that could be. Now White, he started slow and he started to come on last year. There's certainly that talent. Let's see what happens. Vea started slow and last year was kind of the best we've seen of him, but he got hurt. And so we just have a long way to go. We're obviously super excited, but we're talking about top 10 all time. To me, like it's too early for those guys in the conversation maybe. But when you start a career like Wirfs did, when you have a career like Marpet's had, I think those guys are ones that will be considered in there. But Godwin qualifies too, to a degree. I mean, it would be nice to see a little bit more production from him because that does matter. I don't box score scout an individual season, but over the course of a career, that's a huge sample size. If you have great production over the course of a career, you're probably, that's when we're talking about all-time greats for a team, Ring of Honor for a team, Hall of Fame, that's when it's okay to box score scout. You have a huge sample size with which to produce from. So that's what
John,
I like to do.
I'm reading some texts that I got. They're not in the chat. People that were listening live. You need to give me John's address, and I need to send him a couple of games from Leroy Selman. That's insane.
It. I thought it was going to be something for
another person. Leroy number 7 is fighting words. Somebody else texted 0 credibility after that, John. These are texts. These aren't even in the chat.
0 credibility. Because
0 credibility. I'm telling you.
Than you.
And that came from Hugh MacArthur, our owner. Just kidding. It didn't come from Hugh. Although Hugh would probably agree with me.
He would probably agree with you. Yeah, he would. Probably.
Because Hugh grew up here. He grew up during the heyday of Leroy Selman. He knows how important he was.
Oh, he'll be furious when he sees this. I'm sure. I didn't realize 7 was going to be that bad. I knew you'd be mad. But 7 behind 6 other guys that I think are absolutely Hall of Fame talents. That's tough world out here, but here we are.
Not your fault. You're young. That's all. I'm not going to hate you because I just keep telling myself it's not your fault that you didn't live in Tampa during that time. You didn't get to see Leroy play. So it's not your fault. But
you've seen Lavonte David. All right, I'm done. But somebody asked too about somebody asked about who was it they asked about? I wanted to cover the question if we got it, but I don't remember where it is now. It got buried. Somebody asked about Doug Williams. How long was Doug Williams with the Bucs?
He was with the Buccaneers from 78 to 82. So he had I don't figure out the years, but look, he's in the Ring of Honor, and statistically, you would say absolutely not. He's not a top 10 guy. But when you start looking at the fact that he led the Buccaneers to the playoffs, 3 out of 4 years during that stretch he was here, and the way he was treated by Hugh Culverhouse, he absolutely deserves Ring of Honor mention. He's not a top 10 Buck of all time in terms, if you want to base it on statistics and production, but as a leader. And let's not forget, Doug Williams, one of the very first black quarterbacks to ever play in the NFL. And he
first
did it
in the Super Bowl.
First win the Super Bowl. He did it in the South, and he took a lot of racial abuse. In fact, John McKay went into the stands after a Minnesota Vikings game because somebody yelled a racial slur at Doug Williams, and they had to restrain John McKay from going into the stands because he was going to fight the fan, and he never apologized for that. And he took a lot of criticism at the time from the media for that, but John McKay stood up, went out on a limb for a guy like Doug Williams. Again, played at Grambling. It wasn't like he even played at an elite big named school, but some of the things that he did was just revolutionary and very important, not just to the Buccaneer organization, John, but to the history of the NFL. So I have mad respect for Doug Williams. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everybody would agree with you on that for sure. Some confused chat, and this is the last one we'll do because we got to wrap it up. Where would you guys place Warwick Dunn on the Falcons all time? Top 10 list, or
he's a top 25 guy, probably. I mean, I'll be interesting to see what Scott comes up with. I think he's probably a top 25 guy because he ranks pretty high on the all-time rushing yards. And again, if we're going to even include a little bit of the personal thing, what he's done in this Tampa Bay community, the homes that he's bought and purchased for single moms and things like that. There's not a finer human that we could put on a list. If it was a list of humanity, of good people, work done would be number one on that list.
Yeah, he actually did. He was more productive in Atlanta than he was in Tampa Bay. So, I mean, you would think just from that standpoint, maybe he would be higher. They're more productive as a receiver in Tampa Bay, though, for sure. Really good player, no question.
But he was splitting time with Alstott. I mean, they were flipping flopping those guys constantly.
Yeah. He had a couple 1,000-yard seasons, but again, 3 of those came with Atlanta, I believe. So you have to weigh the Tampa Bay versus Atlanta part of it for sure. But yeah, really good player for sure. If he had spent if that all his production had come in Tampa Bay, he would for sure have made.
Scott was so mad when they drafted Work Done over. I think Corey Dillon was the guy that he wanted that year.
I think you're right. Yeah.
And but
I don't know how that ended up career wise, but Dillon had some really good years.
Yeah, he did.
Work was more consistent, probably. All right, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. There's our top 10 list. Whether they angered you or not, we love y'all, and we appreciate y'all jumping in here on a Thursday with us. Tomorrow we'll be back next week. We got a loaded show. We think we're still I'm going to probably tweet out this week, this weekend maybe, because we're still trying to lock things up with a few people for next week. Could be a great slate of shows, though. We might have guests every day next week. That's how crazy it is. We have people potentially in the slot for every day for guests next week. So we'll see what ends up happening with the show for next week, but it's going to be fun time. 4 p.m. Eastern. We'll be live over here on the Pewter Report podcast. We appreciate y'all. We hope y'all have a great weekend. Thanks so much for listening to another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.
Me and Leroy Selman are out.